My name is Dan, and in the past few months, I've started noticing strange behavior from my wife, Lisa. She often stayed late at work, received unexpected calls, and reported strange bills. This began to raise my suspicions. One evening, when Lisa went to take a shower, I decided to check her phone. My heart pounded wildly as I picked up her mobile. Opening a message, I saw it was from someone named Ben. The text was short but contained too many hints. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." I couldn't believe my eyes. Lisa had never mentioned Ben. Moreover, she had told me she had an important meeting at work tomorrow. An inner voice urged me to dig deeper. The next day, I decided to act. I took a day off from work and went to the office of a private detective recommended by a friend. The detective's name was Jack, and he immediately struck me as a professional. I told him about my suspicions and shared all the details I had gathered. Jack assured me that he would start working immediately and would report any findings. Meanwhile, I tried to behave as usual so that Lisa wouldn't suspect anything. Several days passed before I received the first report from Jack. It contained photos and a detailed description of how Lisa was meeting Ben. They dined at a restaurant and then went to a hotel. My heart broke as I read these lines. I knew I needed to gather more evidence before taking any action. The detective continued to follow Lisa, and I braced myself for what lay ahead. When I received the first report from Jack, I felt the world around me start to crumble. The photos showed Lisa meeting with Ben in various places around the city. They dined at cozy restaurants, strolled through parks, and, most painfully, went into a hotel. I couldn't believe this was happening. Lisa and I had been together for over 10 years, and I always thought our marriage was strong. But this evidence said otherwise. Jack continued to follow Lisa, and each new report brought more pain. Jack was very professional. His reports included not only photos, but also detailed descriptions of their meetings. He recorded every movement, every gesture. I knew I had to keep my emotions in check to avoid giving anything away to Lisa. One evening, when Lisa returned home after another work meeting, I sat in our living room holding the latest photos. My mind was filled with questions. Why is she doing this? What did I do wrong? I decided I needed to talk to Jack in person to discuss the next steps. The next day, I met with him at his office. Jack revealed that Ben worked with Lisa at the same company and that their relationship had been going on for several months. "Dan, I know this is hard," Jack said, looking me straight in the eye, "but we have enough evidence for you to make an informed decision about the next steps." I nodded, feeling a growing determination inside me. I needed to uncover the whole truth to understand what to do next. Jack suggested continuing to follow Lisa to gather more evidence, and I agreed. The next few weeks were a real test for me. Every day I received new reports from Jack, and each time my heart broke a little more. But I knew I had to see it through to the end to know the full truth. Several weeks had passed since I hired Jack, and each new report was a blow to my heart. But what he handed me one evening was the final straw. Jack called and asked to meet at his office. When I arrived, Jack looked serious and somewhat concerned. He invited me to sit down and took out his laptop. "Dan, I know this is very hard for you," he began, turning on the video, "but I think you need to see this." The screen displayed footage taken by a hidden camera. Lisa and Ben were in a hotel room. I couldn't believe my eyes. Lisa was behaving with him in ways I had never seen before, uninhibited, passionate, without any restraints. They laughed, hugged, and kissed like newlyweds. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. I felt waves of anger and pain wash over me. Lisa had never been like this with me. Our relationship had always been calm, even somewhat routine. But here, I saw a woman I didn't know. Jack paused the video and looked at me with sympathy. "I know this is hard to accept, Dan," he said softly, "but now you have all the evidence. What are you going to do next?" I sat in silence, trying to process what I had seen. My thoughts were tangled, and I couldn't find the words. Finally, I lifted my head and looked at Jack. "I don't know," I whispered. "I just don't know." Jack nodded, giving me time to gather my thoughts. I understood that I needed to make a decision. I couldn't live in this lie any longer. Lisa had betrayed me, and I had to find a way to move forward. "Dan," Jack began again, "I can continue to follow them if you need more evidence. But if you're ready to make a decision, I can help you with that." I took a deep breath and nodded. I needed to think about the best way to proceed. But one thing I knew for sure, I could no longer endure this betrayal. I had been thinking for a long time about what to do next. At first, I wanted to gather as much evidence as possible to use it in court later, but each new report from Jack only intensified my pain and anger. At some point, I realized I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to confront Lisa and Ben face to face and get to the bottom of it. I chose a moment when Lisa said she had a work dinner. Jack confirmed that she was planning to meet Ben at one of their favorite restaurants. I prepared myself in advance, deciding to act calmly and confidently. That evening, I arrived at the restaurant and sat at a table in the far corner, from where I could observe the entrance. My heart was pounding like crazy, but I knew I had to do this. Soon, I saw Lisa and Ben enter the restaurant, laughing and holding hands. They sat at a table not far from me, and I watched as they started flirting and behaving as if no one else was around. The sight filled me with a mix of anger and pain, but I was determined to see it through. I stood up and walked over to their table. Lisa didn't notice me at first, but when she looked up, her face turned pale. Ben looked equally stunned. "Hello, Lisa," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "We need to talk." She looked at me with horror, and then at Ben, who clearly didn't know what to do. We stepped outside, where I felt the tension building. "What is going on here?" I asked, trying not to shout. Lisa took a deep breath and looked at me with pain in her eyes. "Dan, I really don't know how to explain this," she began. "I didn't want it to come to this, but I'm in love with Ben." Those words pierced me like a knife. I stood there, unable to believe my ears. "You're in love with him?" I whispered. "Why? What does he give you that I can't?" Lisa lowered her eyes, her voice trembling. "Dan, I can't explain it. At first, it was just a game, something new and exciting. But over time, I realized I felt something more for him. I know I betrayed you, and I'm so sorry." Ben stood by, silently watching us. I felt my world collapsing. "And what now?" I asked, trying to maintain my composure. "Do you plan to leave me for him?" Lisa looked at me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't know, Dan," she whispered. "I don't want to lose you, but I can't deny my feelings for Ben." I realized that our marriage would never be the same. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing on the sidewalk. Inside, a storm of emotions raged, and I knew there were many tough decisions ahead. After my confrontation with Lisa and Ben, anger and pain consumed me. I couldn't just forget their betrayal and move on with my life. I needed to do something to regain control and show them that they couldn't destroy my life so easily. I worked at a large IT company, and my position gave me access to numerous resources and information. The idea of revenge began to take shape in my mind. I decided that I wouldn't just walk away from their lives, I would do everything possible to ruin their reputations and careers. First, I started gathering all the information about Lisa and Ben that could be useful. I gained access to their personal and work accounts, intercepting their correspondence and documents. It was illegal, but I didn't care at the time. I felt they deserved it. I discovered that Ben was involved in several shady deals at his job. Using this information, I prepared anonymous complaints to his company's HR department and the tax authorities. I knew this would cause him serious problems and potentially lead to his dismissal. For Lisa, I devised a more intricate plan. I began spreading rumors about her personal life among colleagues and acquaintances, planting compromising information and photos. I also created several fake social media accounts to undermine her reputation and raise suspicions with her management. Every day, I carefully monitored the results of my actions, watching as their worlds began to crumble. It gave me a strange satisfaction, though I knew it wouldn't bring back my former life. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, there was a knock on the door. It was Jack, the detective I had hired. He looked serious. "Dan, we need to talk," he said, entering. "I know what you're doing, and I want to warn you about the consequences." I froze, feeling a growing anxiety inside me. "You understand that this could backfire," Jack continued. "If they find out it's you, they could sue you." I sighed and lowered my head. I knew Jack was right, but it was hard for me to stop. "I can't just sit back and watch them enjoy their lives," I replied, looking him in the eye. "I have to do something." Jack nodded, understanding my desperation. "I understand, Dan, but think about yourself. You've already done enough to start bringing their worlds down." Maybe it's time to stop and focus on your own life. I pondered his words. Maybe Jack was right. I needed to find a way to move on and leave all this behind. But at that moment, I was determined to see my plan through to the end. After my conversation with Jack, the burning need for revenge still consumed me. My job at the IT company provided me with the necessary skills and access to technology that could help me execute my plan. I started by hacking into Lisa's phone. This gave me access to her personal messages, photos, and even work emails. I found numerous intimate messages between Lisa and Ben, as well as documents that could compromise her at work. I saved all this data and began to formulate a plan for its use. The next step was hacking into Ben's phone. His correspondence with Lisa contained many details about their relationship and future plans. But the most important thing I found were messages regarding his involvement in dubious activities at work. This information could ruin his career. Having gathered enough evidence, I began to act. I sent anonymous emails to their company's management, attaching the compromising materials. These emails were crafted to create maximum suspicion and distrust towards Lisa and Ben. I also spread this data among their colleagues and friends, creating an atmosphere of scandal around them. Every day, I watched their lives begin to fall apart. Lisa started receiving threats of dismissal, and Ben found himself under investigation at work. My revenge was beginning to bear fruit, and it brought me fleeting satisfaction. One evening, I received a call from Lisa. She was in a panic and crying. "Dan, what is happening?" she screamed into the phone. "Someone is spreading our personal photos and messages. My job is at risk, and Ben might get fired." I remained cold and said I didn't know what she was talking about. Lisa continued to cry, and I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. My revenge had worked, but it didn't bring me peace. A few days later, I learned that Ben had been fired and Lisa faced serious problems at work. I watched their lives crumble, but instead of satisfaction, I felt only deep sadness and disappointment. The realization that revenge wouldn't bring back what was lost began to slowly seep into my consciousness. After my initial steps of revenge began to yield results, I realized it wasn't enough. Lisa and Ben could still rebuild their lives. I decided to go further and deal another blow by spreading rumors and false evidence to completely ruin their reputation and trust. I started by creating several fake social media accounts. Under assumed names, I began spreading information about Lisa and Ben, adding fabricated details about their personal and professional lives. I also forged emails and messages, making them as believable as possible. The rumors spread at an incredible speed. Lisa's and Ben's colleagues and acquaintances started whispering behind their backs, discussing every new fact that appeared online. Their reputations were undermined, and trust in them began to plummet. Problems began at Lisa's workplace. Her superiors received anonymous emails accusing her of unprofessionalism and unethical behavior. Her colleagues started avoiding her, and the atmosphere at work became unbearable. Lisa tried to explain that it was all lies, but no one believed her. Ben found himself in an even more difficult situation. His clients began withdrawing from cooperation, and his superiors questioned his professional qualities. Each day, his position became more precarious. One evening, I received a message from a mutual friend who knew nothing about my role in this scandal. "Dan, have you heard about Lisa and Ben?" he asked. "It's terrible what's happening to them. I can't believe they turned out to be such people." I just nodded, trying to hide my satisfaction. My revenge was going according to plan, but instead of satisfaction, I felt only growing emptiness and alienation. A few weeks later, I learned that Lisa had lost her job. She was fired based on accusations that were entirely fabricated. Ben was also fired and was now fighting for his professional reputation. This entire situation began to weigh on me. I realized that I had not only destroyed their lives, but also my own inner peace. Revenge had not brought me peace, but had only deepened my suffering. When I thought my revenge was complete, and that Lisa and Ben would never be able to rebuild their lives, an unexpected twist occurred. One evening, I received a letter from Lisa. She asked for a meeting to discuss something important. Despite my desire to leave everything behind, I agreed to meet her. We met at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. Lisa looked tired and depressed. She started the conversation with an apology for what had happened. "Dan, I know I betrayed you," she began, lowering her eyes. "But there's something you need to know. Ben is not just my lover, he's my ex-husband. These words stunned me. I never knew Lisa had been married before. You never told me you were married before me, I said, trying to process what I had heard. Lisa took a deep breath and began to tell her story. I met Ben when I was still young. We got married when I was 23, she said. Our marriage was full of passion and emotions, but over time, things got harder. Ben was very ambitious and worked a lot. I felt lonely and forgotten. She looked at me, her eyes full of pain. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I left him because I couldn't stand his indifference. I moved to another city and started a new life. That's when I met you, Dan. You became my savior, but I never told you about my past. My heart was heavy. I didn't know what to say. Lisa continued to speak, her voice trembling. When I met Ben again at work, all the old feelings came back. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't resist it. I was foolish and selfish. I understand that I deserve all the pain you caused me. I sat in silence, trying to digest her confession. Suddenly, I felt my anger begin to fade. I realized that Lisa was also a victim of her circumstances and her own mistakes. Lisa, I began, I don't know if I can fully forgive you, but I understand that continuing to seek revenge is pointless. We both made mistakes, and now we need to find a way to move on. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Thank you, Dan. I hope that someday you can forgive me, she whispered. We said goodbye, and I left, feeling a strange sense of relief. Maybe this was the beginning of a path to healing for both of us. After Lisa's unexpected revelation, I needed time to process everything I had heard. I realized that my feelings for her had drastically changed. The betrayal and infidelity had left deep scars that couldn't just disappear. I spent several days reflecting, trying to understand my emotions. But every memory of Lisa and Ben brought waves of pain and anger. I understood that I couldn't live with this pain if I stayed with Lisa. The decision was clear. I had to leave. I hired a lawyer and started the divorce process. It was not easy, but I knew it was the only way to free myself from this heavy burden. I tried to keep everything under control, but inside, a storm was raging. When the divorce papers were ready, I asked Lisa to meet me at the cafe where we had discussed her revelation. She arrived on time, but her face showed signs of worry. Dan, what's going on? She asked, sitting down at the table across from me. I took a deep breath and laid the divorce papers in front of her. Lisa, I've decided to file for divorce, I said quietly. I can't forgive what you've done. We both need to move on. Her eyes filled with tears and she lowered her head. I understand, she whispered. I knew this day would come. I just hoped we could fix everything. That's impossible, I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. Our relationship will never be the same. I want to start a new life. Lisa nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I hope you find your happiness, Dan, she said through her tears. Forgive me for everything. We signed the papers, and I stood up to leave. We said our goodbyes, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was a hard but necessary decision. Back home, I started packing my things. I needed to find a new place to live and start fresh. I knew there would be many challenges ahead, but I was ready for them. Most importantly, I was free from the pain and anger that had been burning me from the inside. The final break with Lisa was the first step towards my healing and a new beginning. After the divorce, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Despite the pain and disappointment, I knew I had made the right decision. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life, and I was determined to make it successful. I immersed myself in work, focusing on my career in the IT company. My job became my refuge, helping me distract from negative thoughts and find a new purpose. I began taking on new projects, accepting more responsibilities, and honing my skills. My colleagues noticed my efforts, and soon I received a promotion. But my career wasn't the only area I decided to focus on. I realized I needed to work on myself and my personal growth. I started going to the gym, taking up yoga and meditation, which helped me regain inner balance and confidence. Over time, I began to feel ready for a new relationship. I understood that trust and mutual understanding were key elements of a happy union. One day, at a corporate event, I met Emily. She was a new employee at our company and immediately caught my attention with her kindness and openness. We started talking, And soon, a spark ignited between us. Emily was smart, empathetic, and always ready to offer support. She understood me like no one else, and our relationship was built on mutual respect and trust. One evening, as we sat in a cozy cafe, I decided to tell her about my past. Emily listened attentively, not interrupting, and then took my hand. "Dan, I appreciate your honesty," she said softly. "I see how much pain you've been through, but I also see how strong you've become because of it. I'm here to support you and build our future together." Her words touched my heart. I felt that I had found not only a new love, but also a true friend with whom I could build a future. Several months passed, and our bond grew stronger. We began planning trips together and discussing our dreams and goals. I realized that despite all the hardships I had faced, I had found my happiness. My new life was full of joy and prospects. I understood that I needed to embrace change and use it as an opportunity for growth. Now I was ready for any challenges, knowing that I had someone by my side who would support me in any situation.